This video is sponsored by Pulsar Modular. This is the second part of the video I uploaded yesterday. It will focus on creating patches and show you techniques with Ableton's modulators and distortion. The effect I'm using for the example is the P565 Siren by Pulsar Modular, but all the techniques shown in this video can be recreated with any effect. I will record some sounds we designed today to make a small sample pack that I will share on my Patreon, so if you are a Patreon you can go ahead and download it. In the meantime, here are the kind of sounds we are going to do. So if you click on this arrow here, you will have access to all the parameters and you can control any of them with Ableton's LFO from there. So I'll start by linking the first LFO to the resonance of the filter, for example, to add motion. So it's this one, link it and adjust the settings. In addition to motion, we can add rhythm with LFOs, and my favorite for that is the one called Shaper, because you can draw your own custom shape with it. So I'll map this one to the high pass cutoff to make like a fake sidechain. I'll play with the minimum and maximum values here for the modulation so it has the right movement. Now let's add a couple more shapers to have some fun and a more complex sound. I will add one that will switch the type of the middle filter between bell and bandpass filter. I'll add another on the volume to have a real sidechain effect by ducking it on every beat. I'll also put an OTT at the end just to beef it up a little bit, and I'll also add an envelope follower from Ableton to control the resonance of the low pass filter. So adding a lot of different modulations in this way is very fun and can really add up some rhythm and character to a sound, and that's easy to overlook sometimes. So now I'd like to take a closer look at the envelopes and show you something in the same veins with modulations. So the patch I'm starting with is this one. It's a simple sawtooth wave going through a delay and reverb. And here is how it sounds being low-passed after being distorted. So now let's activate the envelope follower and listen to the movement it adds. Well, we could try to make it snappier by putting the speed at 3 and putting the attack and release at the maximum. And I don't know for you, but I think the envelope could be snappier. So to do that, we will use Ableton's MIDI envelope, which will take the trigger of a MIDI note directly to move the cutoff point. I have it set up with 0 attack, 0 sustain, and a little bit of decay and release. And it is controlling the cutoff of the low pass filter. And this is super interesting to be able to have both this MIDI envelope and the envelope follower controlling the same cutoff knob, because that's not something you can usually do. See here, I'm clicking to try and map that cutoff knob to that new LFO, but it won't, because it's already assigned. To finish with envelopes, let's see how the sidechain works. Here is the patch I'm starting with. So say we want the filter to react to the drum track. We'll select the drums from this drop-down menu, then we'll activate the sidechain with this button up here and adjust the envelope. Or we can use it on the high pass as well to remove some of the lows when the kick hits. Pretty cool and different from the regular sidechain compressor. Don't hesitate to try sidechain filtering with the filters you have. Okay, so let's design a new patch and have a look at the distortion. I'll design a bass, so I've set up 2 chains, one for the top layer that will be processed and one for the sub that will stay clean. So here's the patch I'm starting with in the top layer. Pretty simple, that's kind of a sawtooth going through a high pass filter with a keytracking. And this is the sub layer, just a saturated sine wave. So first I'll distort that with the overdrive activated. And then I'll activate the filter in bandpass mode. The goal is to select only a band of frequency to go in the distortion, because a distortion adds harmonics for every frequency present in the sound, so sending only a band of frequency allows to shape the tone better. Then I've added another instance of Siren to use it as a parallel distortion this time. The distortion happens before the filtering and I don't have the overdrive on, just to use a different distortion. Then I'll activate the low-pass filter, which cutoff is controlled by a MIDI envelope, and it doesn't have much resonance, it's just to have a clearer sound in the transients, it's not for boosting any frequency. Then I'll turn up the dry-wet to blend the sound from before and after this effect, and that's what makes it a parallel distortion. And finally, to seal the deal, I will invert the phase of the signal coming in to cancel out the frequency the dry and the wet signal have in common. I feel like it makes it cleaner in the lows so we can hear better the transients, and we can even emphasize the transients with the compressor. Oh, there's one thing I almost forgot to talk about, and that's something I wanted to do for a long time, but found a way to do it only recently. Say I want this cutoff to follow the keys I play on the keyboard, to open more with higher notes and close more with the lower notes. That is called keytracking, and that allows to have more consistent tone across multiple octaves. Well, how would you set that up in Ableton? In the MIDI effect, there is an effect called expression control, and with it you can control any knob with a lot of MIDI parameters like the velocity, mod wheel, etc. Well, if you click on one of them, you can choose key track. So I'll use it to control the cutoff of the low-pass filter. Okay, that works, but I noticed the frequency seems better tuned to the note I played when I used the range from 0 to 50%. Now that's cool, it's tuned, but what if I want to offset this cutoff? Keep the same range between two notes so it stays in tune, but maybe overall close the filter a bit more. Well, we could use the MIDI pitch effect. We place one before the expression control and one after. The idea is to detune the MIDI note before the key tracking, so it will adjust the cutoff to a higher or lower frequency, and then repitch the MIDI note afterwards, so the instruments will still receive the note we play on the keyboard. So you can detune it as much as you want, you just have to compensate it on the other side of the key track. To make it easier to use, I will make a macro knob by grouping all that in a MIDI effect track. I'll link the first pitch effect to the macro knob and the second pitch to that same knob. Then in the mapping values, I will put the range I want in the values for the first knob, and for the second knob, I will just invert those numbers, so they always balance out. So that's something I could have done with the previous patch with the bandpass filter, to always send a band of frequencies tuned to the note I play. Okay, now I would like to have a look at the delay knob, because there are a few things that we could do with it. Here's the sound I'm starting with, that's a preset from Vital. And here is how it sounds with Siren. Now hear how it sounds when I turn the delay knob while it's playing. See, turning the delay knob during playback affects the pitch, so we can take advantage of that with an LFO. So let's assign it to the delay knob. Right now the effect is too drastic, but if we reduce the depth and the speed of the LFO, we can make the pitch flutter just a little bit to have like a VHS effect. If you crank up the rate and the depth to the maximum, the pitch will oscillate so fast that it will enter into the FM territory. And then between the two you can make some nice vibrato effect. Now, if we put the dry wet at 50%, we'll hear both the original and the delayed signal. And if the delay time is short enough, some phase cancellation will happen, and we'll have the effect of a comb filter. This is the type of comb filtering you'd get with a flanger, but because turning the delay knob affects the pitch, if you use an LFO on it, you would get more of a chorus effect. And because the delay time goes from 0 to 100 milliseconds, you can consider the range percentage as milliseconds as well. They'd be the same values, so 15% would equal 15 milliseconds here. Now, a chorus effect or a flanger or a comp filter would normally have a feedback knob. So let's see how we can build one in Ableton Live. So to create a feedback loop, you'd need to create a return track and send your instrument track to it. On the return track, Siren's dry wet doesn't need to be at 50% because the return track sound will be layered with the original sounds anyways. So from there, all you have to do is to right-click the return button on the return track to allow the return track to be sent into itself. This will create a feedback loop, and this send knob will become your feedback knob. So let's add an LFO to hear better how it sounds with the chorusing effect. Now that we have access to a feedback knob and to a delay knob, the obvious way to use Siren is to use it as a delay effect. The delay would be limited to 100 milliseconds, but the interesting thing is that we can combine it with all the filters and distortion, and having the delayed signal slightly filtered and saturated is the basis of any tape delay. So Siren in this way allows you to design your own tape delay. Be very careful though with the feedback loops. The best practice would be to put a limiter at the end of the chain to not damage either your ears or your equipment. So that's pretty much all the things I wanted to show you in terms of tips and tricks. To sum it up, we saw mainly how to isolate what's added by an effect by inverting the phase of the processed signal, how to use LFOs and shapers to add motion but also rhythm to a sound, how to use a MIDI envelope to have a responsive attack and combine it with a built-in envelope of your plugins, how to use a sidechain envelope and sidechain filters, how to bandpass a signal before distorting it to shape your tone better, how to use parallel distortion and how it combines with the first tip, how to set up keytracking in Ableton Live, how to make a VHS effect, FM and vibrato from a delay knob, how to make comp filtering and chorusing effect from a delay knob, how to set up a custom feedback loop in Ableton Live, and quickly how to design your own tape delay. And also I hope you enjoyed this tour of the P565 Siren by Pulsar Modular. I sure enjoyed it, and I guess the length of this video shows. It's a very complete and complex multi-effect, but it stays easy to use, and it is sold as a filter set, but it can do a lot more than simple filtering. So I hope you enjoyed that, and that you got maybe some new techniques or things that you would like to try out. I would like to thank a lot my Patreons who are supporting the channel. If you are a Patreon, you can now download the sample pack from this video that I shared on there. Thanks a lot to Pulsar Modular for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. In the meantime, have a good day or a good evening. Take care and I'll see you next time.